When I started on my authenticity journey and I started to coach people towards being more authentic, setting their boundaries, showing up as themselves unapologetically, I noticed very soon that there's quite a dark side to this. There's another side to this. There's a way where you can do this too much. You know, when we step into this self-development field, often things are really great until a certain extent. Best way I can explain it is through the example of masculinity and femininity. I think they're both great to embody. But you can take masculinity too far and it becomes toxic, and you can take femininity too far and it becomes toxic. Same thing with authenticity. You can take authenticity too far in the sense that it becomes toxic. And let me explain just how. From a certain perspective, we could argue that taking authenticity too far makes it not authentic anymore. And the example I have to explain this by is there's people that I coached who then asked like, hey, so does that mean that in every single moment, I'm just going to prioritize myself and be a complete dickhead to the whole world just because I could? Like, does that mean I'm just going to run around on the street naked because I feel like that? No, it doesn't mean that. And in this video, I'd like to introduce you to that aspect where sometimes this whole self-development field, this spirituality, but also this authenticity journey and this authentic alignment becomes part of our ego. It starts to reinforce our shadows. And the way that this sometimes happens is when people start to make their identity out of being so super authentic. Oh, look at me being authentic. We might do this without even being aware of this, right? And for me, that was partially the case. I remember that when I was into spirituality and all of this, I would hide that from a lot of people. I really hid it. But then with other people who I knew were spiritually, it always become this kind of battle where I was like, oh, but I've read this book and I've done that and I've done this. And my ego started to get on fire when I started to talk about spirituality and when I felt like it was accepted. So it's very easy when you find yourself in an environment where you're authentically accepted to completely take that like way too far. It's like, oh, look at how authentic I am. Look at me, guys. Look at me being authentic. And that's a pitfall that a lot of people fall into, especially without knowing it. And so therefore, I want to make you aware of the signs that you might be taking your authenticity too far. The one distinction I make and the question I ask myself is, am I acting this way because it's a choice or because it's a response? It's like, am I acting on inspiration or am I acting in a way to prove something? And that distinction between like response or choice and inspiration or proving myself, it became very apparent to me that sometimes I do some type of behavior to prove myself. It's like, look at how authentic I am, that's why I'm going to do this. And that's the example for example, running naked on the street. Well, are you actually doing that because you genuinely want to do that? Or are you trying to prove something to yourself? And there's many people out there who, create these posts on Instagram and especially other coaches, right? Because we realize that the more authentic we are, the more people feel attracted to us. And so we start to create this image of ourselves, this authentic image of ourselves, and then that's the version that we're playing every time that we're in that coaching role. But still, that's a version that we're playing. And so let go of all of this stuff. Big example, and this is something that I saw recently, and it made me realize a quote that I thought was quite funny, is the biggest fear of a diet coach is to be caught eating a hamburger. And let that sink in for a moment, because this is not just about hamburgers and diet coaches. This is about everything in life. But in this case, the biggest fear of most diet coaches is to be caught eating a hamburger. And the biggest pitfall that these diet coaches might make is that they'll realize, I have to be authentic. What I'm going to do is I'm going to eat a hamburger, show that on my Instagram and show people, look at me, guys. I am a diet coach and I still eat hamburgers. Look at how much I'm willing to own up to that. Now, is that authentic? It's a good question to me. And still, if you were to, get back to the principle I just showed you, are you trying to prove something or are you acting from inspiration? And sure, there's diet coaches out there who do this from inspiration, but I also believe that there's diet coaches out there who would do this to prove something. And again, this is not just about diet coaches and hamburgers. Now, the second perspective that I have is that this authentic journey comes with a lot of freedom. And this freedom doesn't come from doing weird things just for the sake of it. It's not about forcing crazy things into your life. It's not about running on the streets just because you could, right? Just because no one will remember you anyway, and it doesn't matter because you're going to die in the end anyway. It's not about all these things. What it is about is knowing that you potentially could, and owning that, and being willing to own up to that you potentially could. And so if the moment was there when you had to, I don't think anyone will ever be in that situation, but think further than just running naked on the street, that in that moment you could potentially do that. And this goes for many other things, because the mistake that most people make is thinking that, oh, if I can just do this crazy thing, then that means that I'm free. Oh, if I can just, get up in a restaurant, stand on top of the chair and scream on the top of my lungs how much I love my father, then that means, that I'm authentic. That means I'm authentic. And, well, no, then you're just proving that that's what you can do. And that is fine. However, the important thing here is that you know that you could, that you're not holding yourself back out of reactivity, but that you're holding yourself back as a choice. Hey, those are not my norms and values, to just stand up in a restaurant and scream that. Though if I wanted to, and if that were to be my norms and values, then I would. And so that means you're acting out of alignment, true alignment, instead of reactivity. And to conclude all of this sort of third perspective that I have is that this whole authenticity journey is just about realizing that you have the freedom to do anything that you want. And at the same time, you have the wisdom to choose which one of those is appropriate and in alignment with your true self. And so if for some reason you come to the conclusion that the thing that is in absolute uttermost alignment with your most authentic self is to go to that restaurant, stand up and scream on top of your lungs, be my guest and do that. As long as this comes from a true excitement as an inspiration, instead of trying to prove something or showing yourself something or showing other people something. And that's what I think this dark side of this authenticity journey is. It's taken it so far that you create an identity out of being so authentic as a response, still in a way to try and control how people perceive you. Because ultimately that's what people pleasing is about. It's a form of control, it's a form of manipulation. As people pleasers, what we're trying to do is we're trying to control the perception that others have of us. And so most people pleasers, or at least some of them, take it too far and they fall in this trap of, oh, look at how much of a people pleaser I am not anymore. And by saying that and acting in that way, that's their manipulation. And they don't even realize, because they feel like, oh, I've been on this anti-people pleasing journey for so long. I've been living authentically for so long. Look at me and how perfect I am. Not realizing that they might have taken it too far and now created a whole identity out of this as a response, as a reaction, as a defense mechanism, and not as an actual authentic choice. And so I hope that this video inspires you to take a look at your life and see in what areas am I reacting, in what areas am I responding just to keep my image alive, just to be portrayed in a certain way, just to be perceived in a certain way. And we can do that by looking at the following questions. Take a pen and a piece of paper, notebook, whatever you feel comfortable with, and answer the following questions. Where in my life do I feel the need that I need to prove anything to anyone else? Second question, are there actions I take just to show that I don't care what other people think of me? Are there any things that you do just to show how authentic you are? Look at me being authentic. Look at me being the best diet coach because I get to own up to the fact that I sometimes eat hamburgers. In what way do you do that? Third question, do I ever push myself into discomfort just to prove to myself that I can handle discomfort? Very good question, very interesting one. And the last question that will help you out here is, what situations make me feel like I have to act a certain way just to avoid judgments? Now answer these 4 questions and see what comes up for you. And then we go to step 2, which is distinguishing whether they're a choice or a reaction. And you do that by looking at the answers that you gave to the previous questions and asking yourself the following 3 questions. If I didn't care what anyone thought of me, if I didn't give a fuck about anyone else, would I still do this? Second question, am I doing this because I want to? Or am I doing this because I feel the need to prove something? And then the third question, if I were truly free, my absolute, uttermost authentic version of myself, would I still do this? Now, and if you want to take that exercise a step further, feel free to look at these answers and put yourself into the shoes of your most authentic free version once more. And from that perspective, answer the questions again in terms of, what would this person do differently? How would this person go about this stuff? How would this most authentic and free version of me go about life? What would it do differently? How would it show up? How would it carry itself? And with that, write it down. Create sort of this image for yourself. And with that, what you're doing is you're putting that frequency, really try to embody it, and you put that frequency on a piece of paper. And so every time you read through that and you feel the feelings that that version of you would feel, you're drawing that version in a little bit closer. This is kind of like manifestation, but it's still pretty easy to do. Psychologically, this works too, right? We're shaping this identity, and we're identifying ourselves with that, just one step at a time. And with this awareness and knowing that, it's about asking yourself this question on a daily basis. In what way can I embody that a little bit more? In what way could I show up differently in this way? And maybe if you have trouble with certain decisions in life or ways of showing up, ask yourself, what would that version of me do? What would the most authentic, truly free version of myself do in this moment? What would they choose? Choose. Not react, not respond, choose. I hope this helps. I hope this changed your perspective a little bit. And I hope that it's preventing you from falling all the way into the dark side of authenticity. We're starting to develop your identity out of it. I wish you a great week.